Charles, I may have mentioned to you there's been a recent update to the software that I use for broadcasting, and it just has been dogging me since the day they did it. But it looks like we are live right now. How are you, Charles? Good to see you there in is that the residential library?
No, this is the end of you're looking into the foyer, the entrance foyer, and I'm sitting at the end of the dining table.
Very nice.
The residential library has become a book hospital, and there's quite on my main table in there. It's a lot of books scattered all over. So I moved out here.
All right, very good. Well, I was out going live earlier today, and this new, extremely confusing way that the broadcasting software works plagued that. I finally got it straightened out, and then 27 minutes into the broadcast, for inexplicable reasons, nothing to do with this upgrade as far as I know, the broadcast cut, and I was talking about a lot of very important information from Lawfare practitioners and their efforts to jam you up. But before we do that, I know there's a lot of stuff that you want to discuss. Of course, Donald Trump has been having economic wins in his dealings with the morons there in Europe. What do you want to say about breaking Brussels?
Well, I think it's a capital plan. I mean, this idea that the European project, absent, creating these gigantic bureaucracies, absent reducing the national bureaucracies, is a stupid plan. It's just, more public sector work, more meaningless meetings, more conferences, more high-level bureaucrats, more imperatives, and more crushing of the argument that it makes sense to invest capital inside Europe, because it doesn't. And particularly, and that's before you start comparing Europe, the chance to invest in Europe versus the chance to invest in Asia or other places around the world, or now under Trump in America. So it's interesting to me that the Europeans were talking big, tough stuff on the trade talks, and then they caved. I mean, the deal that Trump has struck here appears to be, decidedly favorable to the United States. Good on him. And now he's talking about reducing our military presence in Europe, which I think is a project that is long overdue. I mean, I understand in 1946 why you might want to have American troops remain in Europe, and in the 50s. We're at 2025, excuse my language, for fuck's sake. I mean, it's 3 generations have been of people. If you use 26 years or something like that for a generation, that's about 3 generations or so of protection at considerable cost and questionable benefit. That's before you start thinking through the side issues. The fact that we had this vast presence there, and that the Europeans really didn't have to defend themselves with bodies the way we did. How did the attitude of the Europeans harden towards us? Why have Europeans opposed the United States on many important projects that we tried to do? It was good that they opposed the Iraq War in hindsight, but others not so true. And now we're in the midst of a conflict in Ukraine, which, I think it has been pushed on the world really by neocons and very decisively by people in the UK and their allies in Germany and elsewhere. How has this project made any sense for anybody, the Ukraine project? I mean, we were told going back then at the beginning that don't worry, this is it's a defensive project. Ukrainians are going to do all the fighting. We're not going to get into an offensive posture here against Russia. Our weapons aren't going to be used to strike inside Russia. And now look what's happening. Somebody, probably the Brits and maybe ourselves, has blown up a gigantic refinery deeply inside Russia. What the hell is going on here? And I saw an excellent piece in Zero Hedge suggesting that Trump may be getting bad information about Russian casualties. He may have been fed information that says that the Russians are, hurting much more badly than people may believe. And the analysis I saw comports with my own conclusion. I mean, You're not seeing they just passed a law in Ukraine that you can draft 60-year-olds in the
Wow.
military. I mean, that's never a sign that things are going well.
No.
What are you going to? And meanwhile, you can see video footage in the big cities in Russia with military-aged men strolling out in cafes, having a good time. They don't seem to be worried about being drafted into service. And the just a basic level stuff. And first of all, Zelensky is a bad cartoon character. He's a bad comedian who is a bad manager, who is grifting off this exercise, who probably thinks that his next act is Monaco and parts unknown on super yachts who fancy this and that, and having a good old time till he croaks. This is not George Washington, who reluctantly got back into service to free the country. I mean, this is not a heroic figure, and the band around him is corrupt as hell. So this is a European project endorsed by the Biden family, who grifted off it, because that's what they do.
Charles, what about this? Trump was saying that EU is going to invest $600 billion. The second he said that, I was thinking, do they even have that money? And now they're saying they admit that they might have just, said that. They were just joking.
Exactly. One of the things that's very telling to me, contrasting my experience in New York City with my experience here in Malaysia, is that big projects get done very quickly here and very well. Whereas big projects in Europe and the United States, with all the layers of bureaucracy, government costs a tremendous amount. And those costs are not counted. When the government, quote, invests in something, the assumption is that you're going to break even on it. But the assumption should be that it's probably 90% of it's going to be stolen. So, these GDP figures overstate the positive nature or make negative things seem positive in the way they account for them. And when you talk about a $600 billion investment, I mean, if you go back into history, and under the Biden administration, they changed the way they report national investments to inflate it. If you go back into the days pre-Biden and take out residential real estate, take out commercial real estate, the amount of money that's invested in businesses, forget about government, is not that large. And that's because of improvements in technology and just a dramatic change in the nature of how investments are made inside America. So a figure like 600 billion on top of all the other numbers we've heard from the Middle East and other places, you reach a certain point and maybe you shouldn't be investing but maybe we can't take that amount of money. But all that said, the Europeans and these other bureaucrats are masters and mistresses of announcing deals that are nothing more than memoranda of understanding that are not enforceable, fully aware that their game plan is just to milk as much grift as they can from their position, let their husband, wife, partner, family, whatever, get benefits they don't deserve, and just write these breathless reports and issue press releases saying, we made remarkable progress. Keep us in, coach. So there's an element
conferences.
Of that. Meet C in Nairobi. Are you going to be there at the climate change conference? Do you have room on your private jet in your hotel suite?
Yeah.
It's
along
sickening.
the lines of cooked numbers, Charles, what about this whole thing with Trump firing the BLS commissioner?
I think that's BULLSHIT commissioner.
Yeah, the BS commissioner.
See, the issue with this particular report is that it is the focus of investors. Every time it comes out, people are betting, is it going to be good? Is it bad? What are the implications for interest rate if the economy is too hot or if it's too soft? And so there's a lot of I would say gambling, not even speculation around this number. And there's a suspicion that, on my part, that the number is leaked and it shouldn't be, and that people are profiting off that number. That's for starters. Then there's a question of what is that number actually? The unemployment number is an estimate. And how reliable is that estimate? And under the Biden administration, they were desperate for good news. Can you imagine sitting around the top tier command table, your number one pick, you got, the Herbert the pervert, the president, and your number two, you've got that what's that character in Family Guy, the dog. You got a female dog.
Brian the dog.
Yeah, yeah, you got a female
He's
dog.
way smarter than Kamala Harris.
I know, but this is his dumb half sister. And you're sitting around and they're trying to come up with a way to persuade the country that there's good news. And one way to do that is just to cook the books. And if you go back into history on this number, if you go back into history, under Biden, there were many, many instances where the jobs number came in stronger than expected. Only months later, that number was revised downwards. And that is not, that is estimates. As you have to be humble when you make estimates. You have to realize you're guessing. It's a sophisticated wild ass guess. And you can refine it. You can hope, that there are different ways. You'll get a bunch of PhDs to tell you that this model they have is proprietary and it's approaching perfection, or 90% reliability or whatever. But it's a guess. And this is somebody who has presided, the person who was fired, over a long time period, where her guesses helped the Biden administration in theory, but subsequently were proven to be radically wrong. Another thing that happens with that model is they do seasonal adjustments and other types of adjustments, which can really change dramatically what you see. Now, the way I would be doing it, if you could do it, is you have from the IRS and other ways, you have payroll data. And I would be tracking the course of progress of private sector, pure private sector payroll, not, the contractors who, I'd exclude the contractors and the charities that are getting huge grants to do work that the government doesn't want us to know about, that maybe in some cases is illegal or negative. I'd exclude all that. Just the private sector jobs and the frontier of the modern economy are the people engaged in these pursuits. Are they making more or less money week by week? And that's something you can track off payroll data, withholding data. So I would change the whole approach if it were up to me. But I think this woman needs to go. And actually, the best thing I've heard about in the last 24 hours is there are a series of, I think there's one Supreme Court decision, there's a court case that may get appealed, and there's a determination that we can go back to merit-based hiring across the government and across the economy. These are all structural changes that I thought would be much more difficult to get through, and they're being accomplished, apparently, by Trump, in part by Jeanine Pirro, who was just confirmed as U.S. Attorney in D.C. So, I mean, there are a lot, at any moment in time, there are going to be negatives and positives. Some weeks it's more negative than positives, and sometimes it's more positive than negative. I don't like the state of affairs in the trade deal with the U.S. and India. I was told by a high-level source that was very close weeks or months ago, and now it seems anything but close, given that the tariffs are now being imposed at a high level, and the Trump team has just threatened India that they're going to have to stop buying Russian oil, and India's come back and said, well, maybe we're still going to do that. So that does not seem to be in a good place at this moment.
Interesting. Well, Charles, what about the nuclear subs? Have we spoken about that?
Not on this broadcast, but yeah, the Russians have already responded. Trump said he moved 2, and some politicians said we have a lot more than 2, and basically they all have nuclear weapons. So I think over the long history of Russia, and I don't know it back to 900 or whatever it was that they became the Kievan Rus, the Russian people don't respond well to threats, and they watch deeds, and they have long memories. America is a very young nation compared to Russia, and high-level people, Jim Baker, H.W. Bush, and then Clinton, made representations, promises to the Soviet Union before it imploded, that we weren't going to move eastward. Look what happened under Trump, under Biden, under Bush, under Obama, under Clinton. You know, Republicans, Democrats alike have relentlessly pushed eastward, just as the UK persists in a centuries-long program to blow up Russia. You know, if you're sitting there as the president of Russia with all these markers that have been laid down, I mean, 2014, we intervened under Obama because that's what he likes to do, and installed our preferred choice. And then that preferred choice started for a long time, for 8 years, before the special military operation, started bombing Russian-speaking places inside Ukraine. Kyiv started bombing its own people who were Russian-speaking and started discriminating against those Russian speakers. And Russians put up with it for a long time and warned they were going to do something. And then they did something. So, you know, I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand why Republicans and Democrats alike are wasting so much time on Ukraine, of all places. I mean, why Ukraine? You know, why not Papua New Guinea? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. You know, list of priorities. You know, what the hell are we doing over here?
Isn't it clear that what they want to do is destroy Russia through this war in Ukraine?
Well, why would that make any sense? You know, why not spend our time? Let's drop everything and spend our time trying to destroy this big thing that's coming to us from outer space. I mean, it's destroying Russia. You know, how is that? If people ran in 16 and 20 and 24, if we had a debate, is it in America's interest to destroy Russia? You know, who would be arguing for that? Northrop Grumman, Lindsey Graham, a bunch of losers. I mean, it's a ridiculous proposition. And, you know, not just because I've been appearing in Russian media, it's just on the face of it, it's stupid. It's a gigantic country with the most nuclear weapons on Earth.
I think they want the natural resources. This is what the United States has been doing for the past 50 years, going around, destroying countries, taking their stuff.
Well, I wouldn't say that that's the way we do things. I mean, it does happen, but we don't particularly target. If we were going to do that, why would we just take? Well, no, why wouldn't we take Saudi Arabia? They can't defend themselves. Right? That's a much easier.
They have a crooked money laundering deal going with Saudi Arabia.
No, but Jason, come on. There's 26, 27 million people in roughly, called 30 in Saudi Arabia, not 150. They have no nuclear weapons. They have no military forces that haven't been trained by us. If we really wanted, that's the largest, you know, best prize of oil out there, and we didn't take it.
But what is their plan in Ukraine other than that? I mean, if you wanted to just sell bombs, there's lots of puny countries you could pick on and bomb for no reason at all. They seem to have selected the worst possible choice. And also what Trump is doing with, you know, these type of threats, I don't know, it seems a little bit playing chicken with, he's always said like, oh, nuclear, but now no president has ever done this, mobilized nuclear submarine. This is like kind of like Cuban Missile Crisis level stuff.
And put back, you know, there was a big uproar and furor as the European project came together that American nuclear weapons were actually housed on bases in multiple countries in Europe, and they were taken off those bases. And I saw a report, I don't know if it's true, but that we may have put them back into Europe. I mean, this is kind of behavior. If you're a great deal maker, which I think Trump is, this is behavior that doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, if you're a great deal maker and it's a tough deal, and he's put together many tough deals, you listen to the other side. You don't lecture the other side first. You listen to it. You know, and you say, what is it that, what is a win? Is there a win-win scenario? What do you want to accomplish? And I think Russia's not all over the place. They've said Ukraine will be neutral. Ukraine will not be part of NATO. No foreign troops in Ukraine. Denazify Ukraine.
It's all pretty reasonable, I think.
Elections must be held. political enemies, and there's got to be, I don't know if they've been saying this, but we should be saying there should be a free press. We like one in the United States, but let's have one in Ukraine, which we might get to before we get one in the United States. There's certain basic principles here, and they're very reasonable. Particularly, and that's before you start thinking through the graft. We can finally talk about Eric Ciaramella, who I think has CIA connections and was a very young guy. On Team Obama, on Team Biden, probably elevated to the high position that he was to be useful to the project to impeach and destroy Trump.
Oh, yeah.
How that guy got hired, how he got reviewed, how he got promoted, how he got put into a position where he could serve as a quote whistleblower when he wasn't on the conversation surrounding Ukraine. All of that needs to be exposed. And, refreshingly, I like Stephen Miller. He gave an interview with Maria Bartiromo and he's the hardest of hard asses when it comes to thinking through legal issues and tactical political issues. And he said, now with the latest drop, there's no question that it was a coup. He didn't say exactly this way, with a capital C. That's a serious crime. It's a serious set of felonies, and there has to be accountability. I had forgotten that in the case of Watergate, not only did, of course, Nixon resigned, but there were something like 50 prosecutions and 40 convictions. A lot of people went to prison for a long time.
Absolutely. All those Nixon guys. Charles, sorry to interrupt you, but we've got to make our way over to the First Amendment Forum where we could talk about the fact that Eric Ciaramella is now a contributing editor at the Lawfare blog and the Lawfare Institute. Pretty amazing. People are going to be able to join us on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It still plays on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. And right after the live, it will be available to subscribers who follow me on X and subscribe at JG_CSTT. We'll be right back. I want to talk about this Lawfare piece. I didn't know that until right now. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.